The moment I stepped into the forest, I felt a sense of unease wash over me. It was as if the trees themselves were watching me, their leaves rustling in a whisper that seemed to follow my every move. But I brushed it off as nothing more than the product of an overactive imagination, a side effect of the burnout that had driven me to seek solitude in the first place. I had come to this remote wilderness to escape the chaos of my life, to rediscover my passion for photography, and to find a sense of peace that had eluded me for far too long. As a successful photographer, I had spent years chasing the perfect shot, sacrificing my personal life and my mental health in the process. But now, surrounded by the tranquil beauty of the forest, I finally felt like I could breathe again. I set up my camp near a crystal-clear lake, its surface so still that it perfectly reflected the towering trees and the cloudless sky above. It was the kind of scene that I would have once sold my soul to capture on film. But now, I simply wanted to bask in its serenity. As the sun began to set, I built a small fire and settled in for the night. But just as I was about to drift off to sleep, I heard it, a faint whisper, barely audible over the crackling of the flames. At first, I dismissed it as the wind playing tricks on my ears, but as the night wore on, the whispers grew louder, more distinct. "Ethan," they seemed to say, my name echoing through the trees like a sinister invitation. "Ethan, come to us." I sat up, my heart pounding in my chest as I scanned the darkness beyond the flickering light of my fire. But there was nothing there, just the shadowy silhouettes of the trees and the eerie stillness of the night. I tried to convince myself that it was just my mind playing tricks on me, that the whispers were nothing more than the product of my own fears and insecurities. But deep down, I knew that there was something more to it, something that I couldn't quite explain. As I lay back down, I pulled my sleeping bag tighter around me, as if it could somehow shield me from the unseen presence that seemed to lurk just beyond the edge of my vision. And as I finally drifted off to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that something ancient and malevolent was waiting for me in the depths of the forest. Little did I know, the whispers in the trees were just the beginning of a nightmare that would test the limits of my sanity and force me to confront the darkest corners of my own mind. For in the days to come, I would discover the true nature of the evil that lurked in those woods, an evil that had been waiting for me all along. The whispers haunted my dreams that night, their eerie echoes weaving through my unconscious mind like tendrils of darkness. I awoke with a start, my heart racing and my body drenched in a cold sweat. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was, the shadows of the forest seeming to close in around me like a suffocating embrace. As I struggled to catch my breath, I realized that the whispers hadn't stopped. If anything, they had grown louder, more insistent, as if they were calling me deeper into the woods. I tried to ignore them, to focus on the simple tasks of breaking down my camp and preparing for another day of exploring the wilderness. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, waiting for me to let my guard down. It was late in the afternoon when I stumbled upon the cabin. It was a small, dilapidated structure, its wooden walls weathered and overgrown with moss and vines. It looked like it had been abandoned for years, maybe even decades, but something about it drew me closer, as if it held the answers to the questions that had been haunting me since I first set foot in the forest. As I pushed open the creaky door and stepped inside, I was immediately struck by the musty smell of decay and neglect. The cabin was a single room, its floor littered with debris, and its walls lined with shelves that held nothing but dust and cobwebs. But as I scanned the room, my eyes fell upon a small, leather-bound journal that sat on a rickety desk in the corner. With trembling hands, I picked up the journal and began to read. The handwriting was faded and difficult to decipher, but as I pored over the pages, I felt a growing sense of dread settling over me like a suffocating blanket. The journal spoke of a malevolent entity that lurked in the forest, a being of pure darkness that fed on the fear and despair of those who ventured too deep into its domain. The author of the journal had been a victim of the entity, driven to madness by the relentless whispers that had plagued their every waking moment. They had come to the forest seeking solitude, just as I had, but instead, they had found only terror and despair. As I read on, I felt my own sanity beginning to unravel. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, until they drowned out every other sound in the cabin. I could feel the entity's presence all around me, its malevolent gaze boring into my soul like a physical weight. I knew that I had to get out of there, to escape the forest before it was too late. But as I stumbled out of the cabin and back into the woods, I realized that I was already lost. The trees seemed to shift and change around me, their branches reaching out to ensnare me like grasping claws. The whispers were everywhere now, their voices blending together into a cacophony of madness and despair. I ran blindly through the undergrowth, my heart pounding in my chest and my lungs burning with every gasping breath. But no matter how fast I ran, I couldn't escape the feeling that something was chasing me, something that wouldn't stop until it had claimed me as its own. As night began to fall, I knew that I was running out of time. The entity was growing stronger with every passing moment, its whispers becoming more insistent, more demanding. I had to find a way to break free from its grasp, to confront the darkness that had taken root in my own mind. But deep down, I knew that the only way to do that was to go deeper into the heart of the forest, to face the entity on its own terms. And so, with a sense of grim determination, I turned my steps towards the shadows, ready to meet my fate head-on. As I walked deeper into the forest, the whispers grew louder, more maddening with each step. The trees seemed to close in around me, their branches twisting and writhing like serpents in the darkness. I could feel the entity's presence all around me, its malevolent energy pulsing through the very earth beneath my feet. I knew that I was walking into the heart of its domain, that I was risking my very soul by confronting the darkness that had haunted me for so long. But I also knew that I had no choice. The entity had chosen me, had marked me as its prey from the moment I first set foot in the forest. And now, I had to face it on its own terms, or be consumed by the madness that it had unleashed upon me. As I walked, I clutched my camera tightly in my hands, its weight a small comfort against the suffocating darkness that pressed in from all sides. I had always believed in the power of photography, in the ability of a single image to capture the truth of a moment, no matter how terrible or horrifying it might be. And now, I knew that my camera was the only weapon I had against the entity that sought to destroy me. I followed the whispers deeper into the woods, my heart pounding in my chest as I stumbled over gnarled roots and pushed through tangled undergrowth. And then, suddenly, I found myself in a clearing, a small, circular space that seemed to have been carved out of the very fabric of the forest itself. In the center of the clearing stood a tree, its trunk twisted and gnarled like a tortured human form. And there, in the shadowy hollows of its branches, I saw the entity itself, its form shifting and changing like smoke in the wind. It was a thing of pure darkness, a being of shadow and despair that had been born from the collective suffering of all those who had fallen victim to the forest's curse. Its eyes glowed with a sickly, malevolent light, and its whispers filled my mind like a chorus of madness and despair. But even as I stared into the face of pure evil, I felt a strange sense of calm settling over me. I knew that this was the moment I had been waiting for, the chance to confront the darkness that had haunted me for so long. With trembling hands, I raised my camera and began to take pictures, the flash of the lens illuminating the entity's twisted form in brief, blinding bursts. And as I did, I felt a sense of power flowing through me, a strength that I had never known before. The entity shrieked and writhed, its form twisting and contorting as the light of my camera pierced its shadowy flesh. And as I watched, I saw the truth of its nature revealed, saw the countless souls that it had consumed over the centuries, the lives that it had twisted and destroyed in its relentless hunger for fear and despair. But even as I watched, I knew that I was running out of time. The entity was weakening, but it was still strong, still determined to claim me as its own. And so, with a final burst of strength, I charged forward, my camera held high as I plunged into the heart of the darkness itself. What happened next, I cannot say for certain. I remember a blinding flash of light, a searing pain that seemed to tear through every fiber of my being. And then, suddenly, I was back in the clearing, my camera clutched tightly in my hands and the entity nowhere to be seen. But even as I stumbled out of the forest, my mind reeling from the horrors I had witnessed, I knew that my ordeal was far from over. The entity may have been vanquished, but its whispers still echoed in the depths of my mind, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurks just beyond the edge of our understanding. And so, I have chosen to share my story, to warn others of the dangers that lie waiting in the shadows of the forest. For I know now that the whispers in the trees are more than just a trick of the mind, more than just a manifestation of our deepest fears and darkest desires. They are a warning, a reminder that there are some places in this world that are best left unexplored, some secrets that are better left buried in the depths of the unknown. And if you ever find yourself alone in the woods, with nothing but the whispers for company, remember my story, and pray that you have the strength to resist their call.